Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, residents of the West Bank Amona outpost prepare for eviction. A shocking report reveals Hamas is back to its full military capabilities from before the 2014 war in Gaza. And ILTV has a scoop on what may be the next billion-dollar Israeli startup. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with the latest news from Israel. Hundreds of Israelis living in the West Bank outpost of Amona are preparing for their military eviction from the community, and many are forcefully resisting being kicked out from the settlement. Yesterday, the IDF gave the 330 residents of Amona a military order, demanding them to evacuate the community within the next 48 hours. The clock is already ticking for the move-out deadline on Thursday morning. Hundreds of settlers from around the West Bank have made their way to Amona to join the outpost's residents in preparing for the eviction.
התחושות כאן קשות מאוד, עברתי כאן את הלילה, וההרגשה של כולם שחוץ מכמה שונאי ישראל מבחוץ וכמה רדיקלים מהשמאל הקיצוני בישראל, אף אחד כאן לא שמח. תסתכל כאן מסביב, הכל פה קוצים, הכל פה סלעים, מעולם לא נושל כאן אדם מאדמתו. כולם יודעים שזה לא אמיתי ולא נכון, זו עלילה, ולצערי הולכים לעקור יישוב של יהודים בארץ ישראל סתם בלי שום סיבה. וזה כואב, כואב מאוד.
Residents have already been seen moving furniture to block off the entrance to the local synagogue. And Likud lawmaker Oren Chazan says the scene reminds him of the 2005 Israeli disengagement from the Gaza Strip.
Actually, this morning threw me back straight to the days of the disengagement from Gaza Strip. The days of those photos, those crazy pictures of soldiers and police officers that evacuate their brothers and sisters. I hope so that this day will end without violence. I call everybody to act with patience. We need to remember that we are brothers and sisters.
The Israeli Supreme Court has ruled that Amona is an illegal outpost because it was illegally constructed on privately owned Palestinian land. The community is set to be demolished by February 8th after an 8-year-long battle between settlers and the state. Since the beginning of the struggle, the community has grown and now has 200 more children. The Amona evictions come just a day after Israel has declared plans to build 3,000 more homes in the West Bank, marking the third announcement in the 11 days since U.S. President Donald Trump has taken office. The Palestinians want the West Bank as part of their future independent state and are starkly against settlement expansion. Israel disagrees, claiming historical connections to the land and the need to have a presence in the territory for security purposes. The residents of Amona have been given until midnight tonight to pack their belongings and clear out of the settlement outpost before being forced out. But members of the Amona community and pro-settlement protesters have gathered to try and prevent or at least postpone the forced eviction of the 40 families living on the hilltop. Here today to discuss the cause is Ari Fuld, the assistant director of the Standing Together organization. Thanks so much for coming in, Ari.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
All right, so to begin, how are the residents reacting to this evacuation? I understand that you were recently in the community.
So, they're very depressed. They feel betrayed. And not because they're kicking them out of their homes, but because just a month and a half ago, they came to a compromise with the government. And the courts are now deciding whether the compromise is good or bad, but they're kicking them out, and they have nowhere to go tonight. In other words, we have kids in Gush Etzion, 25 kids who came to Gush Etzion last night to sleep somewhere. So I don't even understand the pressure of the Supreme Court to do this right now. In other words, let's get the plan settled. Get them to other caravans, get them to other houses, and let them move out like normal human beings. What's the rush?
So where are these families going right now from what you've been able to gauge?
Some of them are going to Ofra. Others simply do not know. Before the forced eviction, so they did send some of the kids over to Gush Etzion, so they didn't have to see this going on. In other words, these kids are 8, 9, 3 years old, whatever it is, and they see soldiers who they believe are there to protect them are kicking them out of their homes. And the kids are not involved in politics, so how are they supposed to react to that growing up like that? So it's a very depressing feeling that they're feeling right now.
No, I can only imagine. Now, do you expect any violence to be, we're already kind of seeing violence taking place, but what do you think the extent of that is going to be between residents, other settlers in the area, and of course the IDF?
So the people of Amona never advocated for or never supported violence. Let me say that right off the bat. number one. Number two, I'm not justifying any violence because no one should be lifting a hand on a soldier, period. That being said, the Supreme Court is being violent. They're forcibly evicting Jews from Judea without a place to live. That is violent. So to say, am I expecting any violence? It already happened. They're forcing Jews out of their homes. And for what? There are no Arabs moving into these places. What is this all about? What is the purpose for this?
Right, well, I mean, the late father of modern Zionism, Theodor Herzl, said that Jews must purchase land legally to be accepted by the international community. In this case, the government is saying that the Amona outpost was built on privately owned Palestinian land. I mean, what is your response to that?
Okay, so number one, not that you said it, but that statement is 100% false. Number one, Tel Aviv University is built on private Arab land that was not purchased even. Amona was built on land till to date. There's not a single Arab person who has brought proof of purchase. Can you imagine someone coming to you and saying, you built your home on my land, and the courts give judgment and say, yeah, you're right, give it back to him, and he doesn't have to present any proof of ownership? To date, not a single Arab has brought forward any proof of ownership to that land. What are the courts deciding on? What is the verdict on? I don't even understand it. I wish I was being sarcastic. I don't understand.
All right, thank you so much for coming in, Ari.
Pleasure. Thank you, Natasha. Always a pleasure.
Meanwhile, Israel's going to build another 3,000 new homes over the 1967 lines, and unlike the past 8 years, there's been no reaction from the United States. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is describing the recent spike in approved construction projects as a return to normal life in the West Bank and the provision of real solutions to housing and living needs.
גם החזרה לחיים נורמליים היא בשורה, ואנחנו במקביל גם נפתח את התשתיות וכבישים, וגם נפתח ונוסיף הרבה מרכיבי ביטחון. ביחד זה אמור לתת מציאות הרבה יותר טובה.
The newest plan comes just a week after the green lighting of another 566 housing units in East Jerusalem and 2,500 other homes in Jewish areas of the West Bank. Some are even outside the settlement blocks Israel's hoping to keep, even if a peace accord is ever signed with the Palestinians. Some political analysts are saying the sudden surge in building is part of government attempts to dispel anger over the Amona evacuation, as well as due to the more tolerant new administration in the White House. U.S. President Donald Trump has even appointed a prominent supporter of building in the West Bank as his ambassador to Israel, and a delegation of settler leaders was invited to attend his inauguration. Unlike his predecessor Barack Obama, who vocally condemned settlement expansion, there has been nothing but silence from Washington over the flurry of Israeli building plans announced since he took office. The Palestinians are accusing Trump of actively encouraging the construction they insist are damaging the chances of a two-state solution. Now here's a frightening report. Senior Israeli military officials are reporting that the Hamas terror group has successfully restored their military strength to what it once was before the 2014 war in Gaza. That war, known as Operation Protective Edge by Israel, destroyed most of Hamas's military arsenal and infrastructure. For the last 2.5 years, the de facto ruling power in the Gaza Strip has sought to rebuild its military capabilities by compiling thousands of missiles, small arms, and even rebuilding a network of tunnels into Israel. Now, a report from Israel's Channel 2 News claims much of Hamas's arsenal has been restored using makeshift materials found in the Gaza Strip itself. Even more concerning is a possibility that a restoration of ties between Hamas and Egypt could lead to the full opening of the Rafah border crossing from Gaza to the Sinai. If this were to take place, Hamas could import even more materials to build up its military capabilities. On Tuesday, the Islamist terror group showed off its military hardware at a memorial rally in the Gaza Strip, declaring Israel will suffer the consequences for the alleged assassination of a key Hamas weapons builder in Tunisia last December. Israel has made no official comment on the death of Mohammed Zohari. The shocking report into Hamas's strengthened war capabilities comes just after the release of a government report stating that Israel's top-level ministers failed to properly handle the conflict with Hamas in 2014. The report claims that both the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister failed to inform the Security Cabinet of the true extent of the threat to Israel, emanating from the terror group's cross-border tunnels. It's just been announced that the Israel-European Union Association Council will be meeting in Brussels next month in what is widely being seen as significant warming of relations between the two bodies. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, the EU and Israel have had some major differences over the past, but it's really nice to just see these two groups finally coming together.
The focus of the talks will be the building of partnership priorities, which is an EU mechanism geared at regulating bilateral ties and improved cooperation despite deep remaining differences over policy. The 28-member state organization adamantly opposes Israeli building over the 1967 lines, as well as the demolition of illegal structures that the EU funds for Arabs without proper authorization from Jerusalem. The last time the Joint Ministerial Level Council met was in 2012, because Israel has been boycotting the talks since the EU issued new regulations the following year, which cut off all funding or cooperation with any Jewish institutions operating in the West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu curtailed communications even further in 2015 when the body ordered all Israeli goods produced in the West Bank be marked, which prompted accusations of anti-Semitism. But the rapprochement got on track when the premier recently met with EU Chief Federica Mogherini, who he says assured him that the labeling issue is non-binding and doesn't reflect the European Union's position on Israel's final borders. Ministers on all sides have agreed to meet in the Belgian capital on February 28th, which the Foreign Ministry in Jerusalem is hailing as an extremely positive development.
The case of the Israeli soldier who was convicted of killing a wounded terrorist in March of 2016 is one step closer to finally being wrapped up as sentencing hearings are now underway. Sergeant Elor Azaria faces up to 20 years in prison, but as expected, military prosecutors are asking that he serve no less than 3 and no more than 5. The 20-year-old defendant was found guilty by a Jaffa military court earlier this month. He fatally shot Abdel Fattah al-Sharif after the Palestinian terrorist had just stabbed another Israeli soldier in Hebron. A 3-judge panel dismissed Azaria's claims that he opened fire, believing the injured assailant still presented a threat to other troops in the area. Azaria has appealed for the court's mercy in its sentencing because he says his family has been tortured by the proceedings and devastated by the verdict. The emotional case has deeply divided the nation between those who argue that Azaria was only performing his duty, while others, including most of the defense establishment, argue that his actions are contrary to the values of the Israeli army and the Jewish people. Much of the public and several leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, say they'd like to see Azaria receive a pardon from either President Reuven Rivlin or the IDF Chief of Staff. The president has already made it clear he won't consider the matter until the legal appeal process has been completed. American Jews say they fear they're under siege after another mass round of bomb threats have targeted at least 17 community centers across the United States for the 3rd time this month. The coast-to-coast threat of attacks range all the way from Albany, New York to San Diego, California, forcing young children and the elderly to flee the facilities in fear of their lives. Some of the calls were made live, even though many of the previous claims of imminent bombings were directed at multiple victims by technological means. The latest series began Tuesday morning and involved several JCC communities, such as New Haven, Connecticut, that were hit by the previous round of terrorist threats. Some 30 Jewish institutions in at least 17 states were evacuated on January 18th, and on the 9th of the month, 16 others were threatened in the northwest and southern U.S. So far, no explosives have been found at any of the locations. Although law enforcement officials say they're taking the threat seriously, so far no arrests have been made. For now, Jewish centers nationwide are increasing security and renewing safety protocols, and above all else, remaining vigilant amid rising fears that one day these bombings may become reality. It's been reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump will meet in the White House in about 2 weeks' time. Diplomatic analyst Dan Diker tells ILTV's Steve Leibowitz that the main focus of the talks will be security.
Around the world, we hear kind of cautious, very cautious statements and concerned statements from world leaders about what the Trump presidency is going to look like. Do you think that in somewhere in his mind, Netanyahu is being a bit cautious? In other words, we don't know exactly what this Trump presidency is going to be and how it's going to be received in the world. And I'd like to take a little bit of time until I really put it out there and create this impression of a very strong bond between our administrations.
Well, that's actually a key question, Steve, because Mr. Netanyahu is known for his shrewdness and his skill as a statesman, as a politician, and he generally sides with caution. He generally takes a step and waits and sees where the political currents are flowing and how he can maintain stability in his coalition government. And he's become well known for being a what I would call a stabilist, if you were, someone that seeks political stability at all times. And in fact, Mr. Netanyahu has been the longest serving prime minister besides David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of the state of Israel. But the most important thing about Mr. Netanyahu, he is what they call in Israel a bitonist. He is a security-minded prime minister, like former Prime Minister Rabin was as well. And he spends 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to maintain and protect the security of the people of Israel. That is his number one goal. So when it comes to Mr. Trump, I am my firm assessment is that Mr. Netanyahu thinks in terms of security, and how he can achieve Israel's fundamental security goals with an administration that's much friendlier. And I think in the context of what he wants politically, he also has to take into account the very serious security environment that Israel finds itself in. The Palestinians on the one hand, total collapse, Hamas, PLO in total crisis, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Sinai in total crisis, and then we have, of course, what's happening in Syria, which is a security disaster and a humanitarian disaster as well. Netanyahu takes all of that into account when deciding how to move forward with the prime minister. And of course, the final word is the serious threat from Iran, the strategic threat on the ground, as well as the existential threat from Tehran in terms of its ballistic missile capacity.
A lot of Israelis dream of flying to Casablanca on a magic carpet. And now they can, well, almost, but we'll have to explain. All direct flights between Israel and Morocco on regular jets, of course, were grounded in 2004 when bilateral diplomatic relations ruptured over violence during the Second Intifada. But now, after 13 long years, Israelis can hop on a 7-hour flight from Tel Aviv to the exotic North African cities of either Casablanca or Marrakesh, aboard flights organized by the Israel-based travel agency called Flying Carpet. And fares start at just $600. You might be thinking it shouldn't take quite that long to get there since both countries are across the Mediterranean Sea from one another. And you'd be right. Since there's still no mutual flight agreement in place, there will be a stopover in Sicily where Israelis will be handed updated tickets, matching a new flight log registering the plane took off from Italy rather than Israel. The adventurous journey will first take off in May on a trial basis with an option to extend. Earlier this week, I had the chance to sit down with a very unique Israeli startup. Let's check it out. We all know how tough it can be on your wallet to receive the electricity bill and then come to terms with how much of a negative impact your behavior is having on the environment. Well, a new Israeli company has created a solution that not only tackles the high cost of electricity, but the cost of our frivolous use of it. Joining me today in the studio is Avi Mizrahi, the co-founder of Vortex Energy. Thanks so much for coming in, Avi.
Thank you for having me.
So to begin, what does Vortex Energy do?
Well, what we actually do is we're managing energy, okay, for big facilities, like hotels, hospitals. We are reducing the energy consumption of cooling and heating systems with our
air conditioners and heating system.
Yes, and we're using our technology to reduce prices. We actually do it in a model of building, operating, transfer. Like we're selling the cool air to the hotel, for example. Okay, we do all the infrastructure, and then the hotel is buying from us the cool air.
So what kind of impact, is your solution having? I understand that you save money and it's better for the environment, correct?
Yeah, well, we're saving money, we save electricity, and we're saving actually the CO2
Emissions.
going to emissions, yeah.
Now, how much money? You're looking at what I've read online, tell me if this is correct, 50 to 80% decrease in costs?
Well, yeah, it depends, but it can go to these numbers. A large facility that consume big energy can go to 50%, sometimes 80%.
Which is, unbelievable how much money that you're saving. That's really crazy.
Well, what we discovered, we're measuring almost everything about the energy of the place, and then we can predict the energy consumption for the next hour, and then we can be ready for it and make it cheaper.
Wow. Yeah. Now, how did your company come up with this idea?
Well, like I said before, we're selling the cool air. In the beginning, we just do the retrofit. We change the equipment. And then we need to reduce the price. So we try to do a lot of things, maybe like an obsession, okay? We try to do like change the speed of the pump, change this, change that, and see what it does. And eventually we make it a software that learn, this software do action, and then check the result.
So it's like an algorithm, essentially.
Yeah, it's an algorithm that learn, it's a machine learning, okay?
Wow. Good job, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
So-called unicorns have been popping up in Israel like crazy lately, and our business-minded viewers know that when we say that, we're not referring to the mythical flying horse with a horn, but startups worth at least $1 billion. It's practically becoming one of the best challenges in the Jewish state to succeed in spotting which of the many companies is going to be the next to hit the financial stratosphere. The whole phenomena kicked off back in 2013 when Google snatched up the Israeli Waze navigation app, and it's been happening ever since. Some of the top contenders everyone has their eyes on are now listed on the No Camels Israeli Innovation News website. They include Zebra Medical Vision, the Israeli deep learning imaging analytics company that's been providing superior results in combating cancer and other life-threatening diseases. Sisense is on the potential path to Israeli unicornism by helping impressive clients like Motorola, General Electric, Target, and Lockheed Martin with its business intelligence and analytics software, which makes sense out of huge amounts of data ranging from manufacturing efficiency to inventory and sales numbers. Then there's the Israeli open source video platform called Kaltura, which just raised a whopping $50 million from the American investment bank Goldman Sachs this summer. Kaltura enhances websites with customized video and has a whole lot of other functionalities too. Other hot companies include SimilarWeb, which analyzes web traffic, MoveIt, that provides real-time information on the fastest public transportation routes, and StoreDot, which is an Israeli startup that already makes a 30-second smartphone recharger and is developing a device that can power up batteries for electric vehicles in only 5 minutes. There are so many more exciting new companies, and now you can see why it's so fun to start looking for your own unicorns in Israel. And who knows, maybe spotting one can help you to fulfill all of your other dreams, especially if you decide to invest and become the next millionaire. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. The residents of Amona today are struggling to keep their homes. Protesters in North Dakota are struggling to keep an oil pipeline away from their water, while women around the world continue to struggle for basic rights. The list of struggles seem to go on forever, so today's word is ma'avak, meaning struggle. Ma'avak can refer to the struggle for workers' rights, armed resistance, a legal battle, or even a personal ma'avak regarding our beliefs. Just remember that no matter what your ma'avak may be, without it, there would be no progress. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight will be partly cloudy and unseasonably cold with a low of 43 or 6 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is also expected to be partly cloudy and cold, but with a slight rise in temperatures to a high of 59 or 15 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.77 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.